Hey guys, Bugcat7 here. Okay, it is Friday, October 25th, 2019, and I want to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Alright, gang, well, we're going to continue going over the quote unquote giants or large hominids, as I like to call them, state by state. And in this video, we are going to cover Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania has about 32 reports on this website, Greater Ancestors here, and we're not going to be able to do all 32. So I just took out some of the ones that I thought would be of some interest, and I'll just say a few things about it. But what's so interesting to me about Pennsylvania is that many of the remains were found while they were doing excavations for coal. So, this is one of those states where this, coal mining was going on. And in the course of doing this coal mining, some remains were found, including artifacts, some of the oop arts that were found in some of these coal mines, etc. And if they go by this stratigraphy there, they date these things in the millions of years or whatever it is. So, that, defies credulity. So that's why mainstream has a hard time going along with that. But I think they're missing the whole thing. And they don't really know how coal is formed. Not really. So this first one, this first account here with the petrified head and shoulders at Fayette City, Pennsylvania, is just an amazing find. And the story behind it is just, so interesting. Again, something found while mining. Okay, and here's what I think it is. First of all, as I say, I don't really believe that mainstream scientists know how coal is formed, okay? And in one of these articles, not one that I singled out, but in one of these articles, somebody posited the question whether, if these remains were found at these levels of strata of coal, into the millions of years, if they're actually from that time period, either they're actually from that time period or some tremendous upheaval occurred. Okay, so this was what someone commented. I don't know whether it was a journalist or one of the researchers, because a lot of these are researched by Museum of the American Indian, the Carnegie Museum, etc., etc. And I'll read you something about what they say about it. But I got what this is here, okay? So when I hear about great upheavals, I always keep in mind the Thunderbolts Project, the Electric Universe, Velikovsky, David Talbot, Wild Thornhill, Anthony Pratt, all the researchers, Donald Scott, and the whole host of other people at the Thunderbolts Project that do that research there. It seems to me that North America, if you want to, just take a look at the Grand Canyon alone, was subjected to interplanetary electrical discharge. And what you see occurring with these as I forget his name now, but in the arc blasted Earth, you have these arc blasting going on the Earth here, and certainly something like that could create a great upheaval in which bodies could be buried, etc., etc. So, or disinterred and put into a strata of rock, and how all this coal was formed was from this great upheaval that probably had a lot to do with this electrical geoengineering that was going on, by way of what Velikovsky talked about. So I think what we're looking at here, okay, this is in Budcat Seven's opinion, all right, that nobody's called this or said anything about it, but I think what you're looking at right here is a human fulgurite, okay. This was a body that might have been interred, that when the ground was struck by lightning, and lightning, when it does strike the ground, sometimes, I guess, if the conditions are just right, they create what they call our fulgurites, which is really this sort of re-solidified, is made into, actually liquefied by the electrical blast and then re-solidified into this form, which they call a fulgurite. And what we're looking at here is a human fulgurite. I guarantee it, hands down, okay? I'm not an expert or anything. I've studied quite a bit of things to do with the electric universe, fulgurites being one of those things, okay? So, and also with Tartarian free energy geopolymers, one of the most popular videos on my channel, because I put it out there. It's, we have current research that reflects the same thing. So what you're looking at here, folks, is a human fulgurite. Budcat 7 says so. Okay? They say it's petrified, but it's not petrified. It's a human fulgurite, human form, or partially turned into a fulgurite with the insides of it still intact with the skeleton, apparently. Strange find by miners of Apollo mines. Charleroi Mail, July 1909. Strange find by miners of Apollo mines, 75 feet below the surface. Petrified human head and shoulders discovered. No doubt about it being human remains. Specimen is very hard. Museums making inquiries, okay? I mean, bet to this day, if this thing is still around, they don't know what it is. I'm telling you right now, it's a human fulgurite. Guaranteed. I'm 99% positive. Appearing in a newspaper, Charleroi Mail, July 1909 edition, was a news report of a petrified giant who the finders considered to be absolutely human. The problem is that, according to evolution, no human should be found at such a depth as it would indicate the person to be millions of years old. Okay, so I don't know whether that's true or not, but I sincerely doubt it. But I think that, whatever remains are found there from a much later time, and as a result of this great upheaval. And we heard about that in Charles C. Mann's book, 1491, in which there were great cataclysms going on up and down the East Coast, somewhere in the 1200 to 1300 AD. Okay. So, and this is something that is recurrent. What goes on this planet has resurfaced this planet so many times, expanded it, done all sorts of things to it, and it's going to happen again, most likely. Okay, it's been going on since the beginning. Whatever Velikovsky talked about wasn't a one-time event. These things recur. The solar system rearranges itself, or whatever it does. We have no control over it, and never going to. Okay, but it seems pretty clear that the gravity values were much different in the ancient past. This is the only explanation for these dinosaurs and everything else that could have existed at that time, even if you believe in any of that stuff. They don't know the timeline. We don't know the timeline, and whereas I don't believe this is to be millions of years old. I think it had everything to do with a more recent upheaval. According to the Bible, there were giants on the earth before the days of the flood, and hence finding a giant so far below the ground only serves to confirm the veracity of the Bible and the flood, which is baloney. It does not. It's just a little piece of information there. It's not a confirmation. It's just, you can't take it in that context. Okay. Didn't even know about the New World, according to them. So, 75 below the surface, petrified human head and shoulders discovered. No doubt about it being Okay. About it being no doubt about it being human remains. Museums making inquiry specimen is very hard. Charleroi Mail, July 1909. Over the years, science has responded to the numerous claims of giant human petrified remains or even regular sized petrified human remains by claiming that the human body does not petrify. This is despite the numerous photos and claims by other scientists that they did in fact occur and did in fact exist. Okay, so here's where I disagree with them. I think this is a human fulgurite. But everything else that he says in here is quite true. One of the main reasons for this scientific obstinacy is that the petrification process in the wild is supposed to take millions of years, while humans, according to evolutionary science, have only been around for half that time. Okay, well, I think in the Thunderbolts project, or people related to that project, suppose that things could be petrified in a much shorter period of time. I believe that Sylvia goes over it on New Earth, a couple other channels still, okay? Petrification doesn't necessarily have to happen over millions of years. It can happen right away if the conditions are correct. And I think electrical process has everything to do with it, just like my video on the Tartarian free energy geopolymers. I'm telling you, electricity has something to do with it. From the article, science has a problem in the discovery of the Fayette City, the supposed petrified head and shoulders of a human being at the depth of 75 feet below the surface and 2 miles beyond the entrance to the Apollo mines. The specimen was on display at the office of the editor of the Fayette Journal and was thought to be headed eventually to the Carnegie Museum. Petrification of a human body is one problem for science. Finding this evidence at a depth it was found is another. Both of those problems pale in the face of this next quote from the article. The bust was dug from a vein of coal, thrown on the mine car along with the coal, the workman being unaware that the heavy object was a portion of a human being. One view of the petrified head and shoulders of a robust human being found in a coal vein in Apollo mines in 1909. This would mean, according to evolutionary science and timescale, that this human lived from millions to several billion years before the dinosaurs themselves evolved. There is no way to simultaneously believe that this coalified, petrified human head and torso actually exists and to believe in the evolutionary timescale. Consequently, no evolutionary scientist can accept that this man's remains were found where and how they were reported to be found. Better believe that is another incredible imitation by nature. There are several strata of rock and shale between the remains and the coal vein, making it impossible for the head and shoulders to have worked its way down. It was reported as a way to counteract any arguments to the contrary. On one side, the bone of the arm shows it not being subjected to the crushing pressure that the rest of the body sustained. The bone shows plainly. Okay, so look, as I said, this guy, the moderator of this website here, he's questioning it and it's on legitimate grounds and everything, but I'm telling you, it's the result of a great upheaval due to what Velikovsky's theories are all about. And this is how coal is created, and this is the remains of a human fulgurite, okay? I'm sure many more exist, and they can't figure it out. And I'm telling you what it is. It has to do with electricity. All right, so another interesting one. Again, horned giants, okay? And I heard, I don't know whether it's this account or another where they also, one of them had a tail. And this shouldn't be surprising at all because just recently, and not to the last year or a year or two ago, whatever, I did the article about them finding this hominid in Siberia that had some sort of a tail. And Robert Sepper on his channel, Atlantean Gardens, and his other channel did a video about how an entity said about how the Basque people have a tendency to be born with this false tail. But it's not a false tail, it's a remnant from a past that we can hardly imagine, that was more akin to what Tolkien wrote about in his books, the trilogy, The Fellowship of the Ring and The Hobbit and everything else, okay? More akin to that than we can ever imagine. A queer fellow, he was 7 feet in height. His name given to him by his party is Pithecanthropus erectus. Perhaps he was an Indian, perhaps not. At the age of 35, he was a tottering old gentleman. At 40 or earlier, he usually died. Conjure up your imagination of a race of people 700 years old. Draw a mental picture of one and make him 7 feet tall and of perfect physique. Let him be strong but ignorant. Okay, so he moderates, puts assumption in there, of course. It seems that these races in the past, according to the research that was done, and I read about in Mann's book and also C.W. Ram's book, The First American, that these people were highly, highly intelligent and even had some, techniques and things that are just inexplicable for their time, such as etching 400 years before European metallurgists even knew about it. Making one of a race which at 35 years was growing old and which at 40 was near death. Finally, give him horns about an inch long, protruding from his skull about 2 inches above the ears. Such a man there was once, and no further from Elmira than what is now the Murray Farm in Sayre. And I can't help thinking about Moses, Moses has horns, but I think it's a representation of Saturn on his head, if I'm not mistaken, but it could be both. People walking around with horns way back when. If you're just a mortal and human, picture those horns and say, gee whiz. If you have the professional instinct, say that it is a perfect case of Pithecanthropus erectus, and jot it down mentally that it is the first discovery of its first kind on record and one of the big Indian lore finds for recent years. The credit of discovery goes to the expedition headed by Professor W.K. Moreland of Phillips Andover Academy and Professor A.B. Skinner, who was a very famous one, of the American Indian Museum of New York, to which the skull of the horned Indian was shipped several days ago and never to be seen again. The expedition found at Sayre contributions of testing worth to the history of the Indians. The horned skull of this gigantic ancestor of the Tiougans is probably the most spectacular of its discoveries, but no less interesting in the assertion based on the actual evidence that about 700 years that southern Tioga and Chemung counties in northern Pennsylvania were inhabited by a race of men, perhaps Indians or perhaps not, who were gigantic in stature and lived only a short term in life. To prove the assertion of the scientists are the bones of 68 men of old taken from a single burying ground on the Murray Farm, which is situated at the Tioga Point at the upper end of Queen Esther's Flat. The average height of these men whom the skeletons assemble is 7 feet, while many are much taller. Further evidence of their gigantic size is found in remarkable large celts or axes, hewed from stone, found in these graves within them and capable of being wielded only by a man of immense physical strength. So here, unlike in New York, okay, that William A. Ritchie reported, the head archaeologist of New York for many, many years in the 60s, okay, reported finding these finds with all these oversized artifacts and items, okay, and here you have skeletons found with the items with them, okay. Whereas Ritchie didn't find any, and he was a big shot and influenced a lot of people. So there's the article, seems pretty long. And that's 1916. Okay, so I'm not going to read about these, age of these people, but, in my own opinion, okay, is these people were dying young, these giant people were dying young because they were suffering from the effects of a different gravity, you see. So, and they were starting to devolve, okay, and this fellow on this website, Greater Ancestors, agrees with that kind of thing. Okay, this is Lancaster Daily Intelligencer, 17th of August, 1881. Actually, 12-foot stone man. And actually, Mr. McCauley has the contract from the Wilkes-Barre Coal and Iron Company for sinking a coal shaft. It is 20 feet square and is intended to have 2 tracks for carriages to run hoisting up the coal, and is said to be the largest opening of the kind in the coal regions. It is located near the base of the mountain and has reached a depth of 475 feet. On Saturday last, when the gang, or what is known as the second shift of men, were about retiring after firing off a course of holes, Tom Cassidy, the foreman, descended the shaft to ascertain the result of the explosion and was astonished to find an immense cavity. Okay, this is very interesting. In one of the sides of the shaft, the explosion appeared to have a terrible effect and caused more damage than benefit on account of an unnecessary opening in one side. But his astonishment was still greater, increased on clearing away some of the dirt and refuse of rock blown by the shots to discover a solid mass of rock in which appears a clearly defined human shape of giant proportions. All the limbs, muscles, and lineaments are apparent. The rock is about 16 feet in length, 10 inches in breadth, and about 8 inch in thickness. The dimensions of the human frame are giantly, measuring 12 feet in length and 4 feet across the chest. Across the breast is the impression of a huge shield, about 4 feet in circumference, while the right hand clutches the broken and butt end of a large cutlass or sword. The rock was taken out whole and is now in possession of Mr. Macaulay. Okay, so whoever knew what happened to this thing, but again, not necessarily petrified, but human fulgurite. Some of the formations on this planet, okay, have been caused by this interplanetary electrical discharge. Okay, if you don't know anything about it, please visit the Thunderbolts Project on YouTube and see what it's all about. See what Velikovsky was talking about and what things can happen when electricity is what rules the processes of the universe. 10 to 12 feet stone giant, Butler County, prehistoric being unearthed by blast. Dynamite throws up a tree with a stone giant. So another one of these human fulgurites that I'm talking about, okay? They say that the human body cannot be petrified or whatever. I'm telling you, well, it's not petrified, it's a fulgurite. Okay? This thing was hit by electrical charge sometime, a massive one, and it was lying in dirt or whatever, and it just thinks dirt around it liquefied and reformed as a fulgurite. All right. J. Cran Klein, a civil engineer, has discovered in West Liberty a remarkable stone man, doubtless the relic of some prehistoric age. Thousands visited the spot yesterday where the fossil form of a long-dead giant, who must have been a fully 10 or 12 feet in height, reposes. Its unearthing being a result of a dynamite blast on Friday, the charge being placed beneath a tree by workmen to remove it. With the tree high in the air flew the giant form of a prehistoric being, which came down among its scattering roots. As there was no rock formation where the blasting was done, and there was no rock uncovered in the hole left where the tree had stood, attention was once directed to the mass of strangely shaped stone which had been thrown into the air. Though hardly broken, it could be seen that the figure was that of a human being, and a search was begun for the missing parts. The skull and arms and feet made the searchers sure that the remains were those of a human being. Carnegie Museum of Natural History. The specimen will be sent to the Carnegie Museum, where the remains were found are several alum and sulfur springs, and this explains the petrification of the corpse. Well, I'm sorry, they're wrong. It's a human fulgurite, and it's just bullshitting everybody. The Pittsburgh Press, September 7, 1903. Here's an account. Is what the moderator said. And here's an account that the stone giant was received by the Carnegie Museum. So is the journal conspiring and deceiving the public to sell papers, risking a lawsuit from one of the most powerful institutions in the world? Did this small paper print lies, risking a legal battle with the Carnegie team of lawyers? Not likely. If it were so, why didn't the Carnegie Museum pursue? Why does this paper still exist? Of course, the more plausible explanation is that the Carnegie Foundation received this giant. The Carnegie kept the find on the hush-hush, and it went into Carnegie's own private collection. Much like the Smithsonian, the rich and powerful collect rare specimens and hide them away, which is no doubt what's going on. and they can't let us know what the real past is about because we might get scared, and they don't want us to know what our reaction is going to be to a history that's not the one we've been taught. Canonsburg, ancient giants, bodies of prehistoric men found in Canonsburg. Now, this one was one where it's a later one from 1933. Okay, and they're not saying the size, except that in here it says right over here, they were not of extraordinary size. Okay. The skeletons of those of a well developed people that fought great battles hundreds of years before the Europeans discovered America, Mr. Fisher says. Fisher is another one of these archaeologists, state archaeologists. We don't know exactly when they lived, and here is the embodiment of the New World bias in this statement here. You know, not that he's incorrect in his premise, but you'll see why when I read it, okay? Mr. Fisher said, we don't know exactly when they lived, except that it was, as far as America goes, prehistoric time. Probably 1,000 years ago. They were not of extraordinary size. Okay, so you see that. They lived, except that it was, as far as America goes, prehistoric. Okay, so when you're referring to prehistoric times, it's different in America. Okay, in the Americas than it is in an old world, because the old world is the old world, and this is the new world. Okay, and it can't be that way. You see, so I'm just saying, this is, again, whatever it is, prehistoric should be prehistoric, no matter where it is on this planet. You can't be confusing people with different prehistoric time periods. It's nonsense. You understand? It's in there to confuse us. Okay? And I think that's all I really wanted to say about this was just, I noted, as we get nearer in time that, they're injecting their own propaganda into this. Okay. Carnegie Museum's curator finds a giant. Dr. W.J. Holland, curator of the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh, and his assistant, Dr. Peterson, a few days ago opened up a mound of the ancient race that inhabited this section and found the skeleton of a man between 8 and 9 feet tall. This mound, which was originally about 100 feet long and more than 12 feet high, has been somewhat worn down by time. It is on the J.B. Sechrist farm in South Huntington Township. That farm has been in the Sechrist name for more than a century.